It started like any other Wednesday night. I was sitting at the kitchen table, half focused on work emails, half finished with a piece of leftover pizza. The air was quiet, too quiet. Across from me, Lena sat twisting her wedding ring around her finger. She hadn't said a word in minutes, and when she finally did, it changed everything. I want a divorce. That was it. No build-up, no warning, just 4 words dropped like a brick. I looked at her, waiting for something, anything to explain. She avoided my eyes, staring at the wood grain on the table like it might give her courage. Can I ask why I said evenly? She launched into the kind of speech that sounded rehearsed. We'd grown apart, she said. She felt unfulfilled. We wanted different things. It was every line you'd hear in a breakup book. But then she brightened as if remembering her solution. I don't want us to be strangers, she said quickly. We've shared too much. I think we can still be close friends after this. Real friends. Friends, I repeated. Yeah. We'll still talk, still be there for each other, just without the marriage part. It doesn't have to be ugly. I stared at her. She wanted to leave the marriage but keep me as her emotional support handyman backup contact and probably financial safety net. Instead of arguing, I smiled. Friends help friends, right? Her face lit up. Exactly, I'm so glad you understand. I was worried you'd be angry. I'm not angry, I said softly. Just curious to see what being friends actually looks like. The divorce process went smoothly enough. No kids, no shared accounts. She kept the house. I packed my boxes and stayed with my brother for a while. She kept saying this wasn't an ending, just a new beginning. When I loaded the last box into my truck, she hugged me in the driveway. You'll see, she said. We'll both be happier this way. Maybe we will, I said, and meant it. Though part of me already knew what was coming. 3 days later, at 9:04 p.m., my phone rang. Hey, I answered. Thank God, Lena said, breathless. The garbage disposal's making this awful noise. I think it's broken. Can you come fix it? I've got a big presentation tomorrow. I paused. That sounds frustrating. Have you called a plumber? A plumber. That's like $200. Yeah, probably. That's who people usually call when their disposal breaks. But you've fixed it before. I said, calm as a pond. When I was your husband, now I'm your friend. So, my advice is to call a professional. The line went quiet for 3 seconds. So you're not coming over? Not tonight, I said. I've got plans. My plans were a beer and a crime documentary, but plans are plans. Oh, okay, she said, clearly stunned. I'll figure something out. You will, I replied, then hung up. I sat there smiling. The friendship had officially begun. A few nights later, 3:00 a.m. to be exact, my phone buzzed again. Marcus, she whispered urgently. The smoke detector won't stop beeping. Please come take the battery out. I can't sleep. Then it'll take you 2 minutes, I said, still half asleep. I'll text you a video. I can't bother my neighbor, she protested. But you can bother me, I asked. That shut her up. I sent her a YouTube link anyway. The beeping stopped 20 minutes later. So much for helplessness. Then came the car trouble. She called during her lunch break, panicking. The check engine light's on. What if the car explodes? Cars don't explode from warning lights, I said. When was your last oil change? Maybe 6 months ago? Then get an oil change, or take it to the shop. Can you take it for me? You know I hate mechanics. I'm at work, I said, but I'll text you a good honest one. You're really not going to help me with this, she snapped. I am helping. I'm giving you a solution. She sighed dramatically. Fine. Whatever, I'll handle it. Perfect, I said. That's what friends do. For the next couple of weeks, the pattern repeated. She'd call for little things, furniture to move drains, to unclog resumes to check. I started saying the same 5 words, you'll figure it out, Lena. Every time she sounded shocked that I wasn't rushing to rescue her, every time I stayed calm. This was her idea after all. Then came the night that sealed it. I was out to dinner with my brother when my phone buzzed repeatedly, 7 missed calls from her. I finally called back. I've been trying to reach you for an hour, she cried. I locked myself out of the house. Okay, I said, finishing a fry. Did you call a locksmith? A locksmith. They want $200 and an hour to come. You could be here in 20 minutes for free. I said evenly, but I'm not going to. Her voice turned icy. Excuse me. You wanted to be friends, I reminded her. Friends don't expect each other to drop everything for emergencies. Friends make decisions. You can pay the locksmith or wait. Your call. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she said, her voice cracking. I'm not doing anything to you, I replied. I'm being your friend, the kind who believes you're capable. She hung up. An hour later, a text arrived. Locksmith came. $180. Thanks for nothing. I replied, glad you got in safely. You handled it. My brother raised an eyebrow. Everything good? Yeah, I said, smiling to myself. She's finally learning what friendship means. 2 weeks after the locksmith incident, my phone buzzed early on a Saturday morning. The text read, "Emergency. Need to talk. Can you come over?" I almost ignored it, but something about the word emergency made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I drove over. When I arrived, Lena was sitting at the same kitchen table where she'd once asked for a divorce. Only now it looked like a war zone, unpaid bills, pink past due notices, and unopened envelopes spread across the surface. She looked exhausted. "Thank God you came," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm in trouble." I sat down across from her, the smell of stale coffee in the air. "What kind of trouble?" "The mortgage payment's due Monday," she said quietly. "I'm short, about $800. I leaned back in my chair. "That's not small, Lena. What happened?" She ran her hands through her hair. "The car repairs cost more than I expected. Then the washing machine broke and I had to replace it. And the conference for work I had to pay up front, but I'll get reimbursed next month." I nodded slowly, so a few bad breaks. "Exactly. And I was hoping you could help me out just this once. I'll pay you back as soon as I get reimbursed." There it was. The real reason she'd wanted to stay friends. The safety net clause of our post-divorce friendship. "Let me get this straight," I said carefully. "You divorced me, kept the house, and now you want me to help pay for it." Her face flushed. "It's not like that, it's just temporary. You know I can afford it usually." "Can you?" I asked quietly. "Because if you're short after 2 months, maybe this house isn't as affordable as you thought." "I can afford it," she snapped. "I just had unexpected expenses." "Lena," I said gently, "life is unexpected expenses. Cars, appliances, roofs, taxes. That's the deal." Her jaw tightened. "So you're not going to help me?" "I'm saying friends don't make each other's mortgage payments," I replied. "That's what spouses do." Her eyes started to well up. "Please, Marcus, I'm begging you. Just this once. You could sell the house," I said, "or rent out a room, or call your bank, set up a payment plan. There are options." "I'm not selling our house," she said, voice trembling. "It's not our house," I said calmly. "It's yours. That's what you wanted." She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I'd become. "You used to care about me." "I still do," I said. "That's why I'm not rescuing you. You wanted independence. This is what it looks like." Tears started to fall. "I can't believe how cold you've become." "I'm not cold," I said. "I'm just finished carrying your weight." I stood to leave, but she caught my sleeve. "Wait, what if I pay you interest like a loan? What if I said you act like the independent adult you said you wanted to be?" Her expression hardened. "This isn't fair." "Fair," I said. "You wanted out of this marriage. You got exactly what you asked for. The fact that it's harder than you thought doesn't make it unfair." She didn't reply. Just sat there crying quietly into a stack of bills. As I reached the door, I said, "Call your bank, Lena. Or your parents. They'll probably help. But I won't." When I left, I didn't feel triumphant. Just clear. That night, she texted, "Found another solution." "No thanks to you." I replied, "Glad to hear it. Friends figure things out." 3 weeks later, I drove past the house and saw a for rent sign in the yard. Apparently, she'd moved in with a roommate and was renting the house to cover the payments. It was actually a smart move. I was proud of her for the first time in a long time. Maybe I thought she's finally learning how to stand on her own. Months passed quietly. We barely talked. I assumed the friendship experiment was over. Then one Friday night, I went to a local sports bar for my cousin's birthday. Halfway through the game, I spotted someone familiar sitting alone at the bar, Rachel, Lena's best friend. I debated walking over. We'd met a dozen times during my marriage, but never really talked. Lena always did the talking for both of us. Still, Rachel looked miserable, staring into her drink like she wished it could transport her somewhere else. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. She looked up surprised and smiled faintly. "Sure. You look as thrilled to be here as I am." I laughed. "I was dragged here for family reasons." "You. Work thing," she said. "My boss thinks forcing us to network over beer and nachos will build morale." We started talking casually at first about the game, about bad bosses, about how hard it was to find a decent coffee shop in this part of town. She was smart, funny, quick with dry humor. After an hour, she looked at me and said, "Can I ask something?" "Sure. How are you doing?" With everything that happened. I shrugged, better than expected. Honestly, it was the right call. She nodded. "I figured you'd say that. She used to complain about you all the time." "Yeah, that sounds like her," I said, smiling faintly. "What did she say? That you were too practical? Too focused on money and stability? Too boring?" I raised an eyebrow. "Those sound like good problems to have." "They are," Rachel said, chuckling. "Especially when you're the one paying rent after blowing your mortgage money on a trip to Vegas." I nearly choked on my drink. "She did what?" Rachel laughed. "Yeah, last month. Posted pictures all over Instagram, then called me crying about her car payment." "Did you help her?" "No," she said firmly. "I told her to call her bank. I'm not her financial lifeline." I smiled. "You sound like me." "Maybe you were just the first one to set boundaries," she said softly. For the first time in a long while, I felt light. No tension, no performance. Just two people talking. When the night ended, she said, "Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime?" No drama. Just coffee. I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." Our coffee turned into 3 hours of conversation that neither of us wanted to end. Rachel was easy to talk to, no pretension, no hidden agenda. We didn't talk about Lena much, which was refreshing. It was just two people sharing stories about work childhood and the absurdity of modern life. When we said goodbye that day, she smiled and said, "Let's do this again." We did. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends. Before long, we'd slipped into something that felt natural, comfortable, but alive. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd spent walking on eggshells until I didn't have to anymore. She wasn't like Lena. She didn't demand attention or validation. She didn't treat responsibility like a punishment. She paid her own bills, kept her word, and never turned small inconveniences into world-ending crises. For once, I was with someone who treated me as a partner, not a personal handyman with emotional benefits. For a while, life was quiet, peaceful. And then, as always, Lena called. It was a Saturday afternoon. Rachel and I were at Target of all places debating coffee makers. She liked the French press. I preferred something with a timer. Then we heard a sharp gasp from the next aisle. "What the hell is this?" I didn't even have to turn around. That voice was burned into my memory. Lena stood at the end of the aisle, staring at us like she'd just witnessed a crime scene. A basket of cleaning supplies dangled from her arm, forgotten. Her eyes darted from me to Rachel and back again. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice even. "How's it going?" "How's it going?" she repeated, her voice climbing. "You're here. With her." Rachel squeezed my hand but said nothing. She'd expected this moment. "We're shopping," I said, gesturing at the coffee makers. Don't you dare act like this is normal," she snapped. "How long has this been going on?" Rachel met her gaze calmly. "About 2 months." 2. Lena blinked, caught off guard. "You've been dating my ex-husband for 2 months." Rachel's tone didn't waver. "And I haven't been your best friend for a long time, Lena." That stopped her cold. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means friendship goes both ways," Rachel said. "You only called when you needed something. You never asked how I was doing. You never listened. You just dumped problems and expected everyone to fix them." Lena's face twisted. "I was going through a divorce." "That was 6 months ago," Rachel replied. "And even before that, you treated everyone like tools. Me, him, your co-workers. Everyone existed to make your life easier." I stayed quiet, letting the moment breathe. The crowd around us had grown still, a couple of shoppers pretending to look at toasters while clearly eavesdropping. Lena's voice rose again. "You're dating my ex-husband. That's girl code 101. Rachel gave a small, incredulous laugh. "Former friend. And girl code doesn't cover relationships built on respect, something you wouldn't understand." "That's not fair." "Neither was expecting everyone to solve your problems for you," Rachel said. I finally stepped in before it escalated further. "Look, this doesn't need to be a scene." Lena turned to me, furious. "Adults don't date their ex-wife's best friend behind her back." We weren't hiding anything, I said. We just didn't feel the need to announce it. "You wanted to be friends, remember?" Friends respect each other's choices. This is different and you know it, she said, trembling. She knows everything about our marriage private things. Rachel smiled, not unkindly, like how you used to complain he was too practical or that he didn't fix things fast enough. You told me everything Lena and you made him sound like the problem when it was always you refusing to grow up. Lena froze. You told her. Actually, Rachel cut in, he didn't have to. You did that all by yourself. Every time you called me crying about another crisis, I got the picture. Lena's eyes flashed with humiliation. I need to talk to you, alone. No, Rachel said calmly. We can talk right here. This is private? It stopped being private when you decided to confront us in the middle of Target, Rachel said. You made it public, not me. Lena looked around and realized people were staring. Her voice dropped, shaking. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Rachel said. Because I'm done pretending your problems are everyone else's responsibility. I'm done cleaning up after your bad choices. And I'm definitely done feeling guilty for being happy with someone who treats me like an equal instead of unpaid help. So that's it, Lena said bitterly. You're choosing him over me. Rachel didn't blink. I'm choosing myself over your drama. There's a difference. Lena turned to me, eyes desperate. And you're okay with this with her? I'm okay with someone who wants to be with me, I said. Not someone who just wants what I can do for them. That's not true, she whispered. I just wanted to stay friends. Friends, I said, nodding slowly. Don't call their ex-husbands to fix garbage disposals and pay mortgages. That's not friendship, Lena. That's keeping all the benefits of a marriage without the commitment. She stared at us speechless, her face crumpling between rage and disbelief. I can't believe this is happening, she said finally. What's happening? Rachel said gently, as that two people you used to rely on decided they're done being used. Lena's lip trembled. You were supposed to be my friend. I was, Rachel said, until I realized friendship doesn't mean servitude. We watched her storm out of the store, her basket abandoned in the aisle. The silence that followed was strange, heavy, but freeing. Well, I said finally, that went better than expected. Rachel laughed softly. Give it time. I have a feeling the real drama hasn't even started. She was right. Because when people lose control over you, they don't let go quietly. 2 quiet weeks passed after the scene at Target. No calls, no texts, no accidental run-ins. For the first time since the divorce, I felt truly free. Rachel and I spent our evenings cooking simple meals, watching old movies, and laughing about things that weren't tied to anyone else's chaos. It felt easy, uncomplicated. That's usually when trouble knocks. It was a Thursday evening when I heard it 3 sharp knocks on my door. When I opened it, Lena was standing there perfectly put together. Hair done, makeup flawless, dressed in the navy dress she knew I'd always liked. We need to talk, she said, brushing past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. I sighed and closed the door. About what? About us, she said. About this mistake we've both made. Which mistake, I asked, leaning against the wall. This divorce, she said earnestly. This ridiculous friendship experiment. It's not working. I kept my tone calm. It's working fine for me. She frowned, crossing her arms. Marcus, I've been thinking about everything. I made mistakes, okay? I was too demanding, too critical sometimes. But I can change. People can change. I studied her. Why now? She took a step closer, her voice softening. Because I miss you. I miss us. I miss having someone who actually cares about me. I almost laughed. You mean someone who solved your problems for free? Her face twisted. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? It's about realizing that what we had was special, she said quickly. I thought I wanted independence, but independence is just loneliness with extra bills. She tried to smile like that was supposed to sound poetic. Lena, I said, shaking my head. What about Rachel? Her expression hardened instantly. She's using you. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. She's only dating you to get back at me, she insisted. Come on, think about it. What are the odds that my best friend just happens to fall for my ex-husband? She planned this. It's revenge. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Rachel appeared in the doorway drying her hands on a dish towel. Actually, she said calmly, I didn't plan anything. I just recognized a good man when I saw one. Lena spun around, glaring. This is none of your business. Rachel didn't flinch. It became my business the moment you showed up at our home uninvited. Our home, Lena repeated, incredulous. This isn't your home. It is now, Rachel said. The color drained from Lena's face. You moved in with him. Last week I said evenly. Turns out it's pretty easy to live with someone who doesn't treat you like hired help. Lena stared at us like we'd both betrayed her in the same breath. But we could try again, she said, desperate now. We could go to counseling. We could fix this. Fix what I asked. I'm not broken. Her lip trembled. That's not true. It absolutely is, I said. I sleep better. I laugh more. I actually enjoy coming home. I have more money because I'm not constantly cleaning up someone else's financial mess. I would pay you back, she said quickly. With what money, I asked. You're renting out your house and living with a roommate. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She had no answer. Here's the thing, I continued. You got exactly what you asked for. You wanted a divorce, so we got divorced. You wanted to be friends, and I've been your friend. I've given you advice, respected your space, and treated you like an adult. That's friendship. But friends help each other, she said. They do, I replied. Within reason. They don't pay each other's bills, they don't show up at their ex's house uninvited, and they definitely don't try to sabotage each other's relationships. Rachel stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. Real friends also don't manipulate people into feeling guilty just because you made bad choices. I'm not trying to manipulate anyone, Lena snapped. You're trying to rewrite a story you already ended, Rachel said. Lena turned back to me, her eyes glassy. Marcus, please, don't do this. Don't throw away 12 years. I took a breath. I didn't throw anything away, Lena. You did. The day you decided you wanted something different. I was wrong, she shouted. Can't you just— Maybe you were, I said, but that doesn't make it my job to fix. Her shoulders sagged. You'll regret this, she said quietly. The only thing I regret, I said, is not doing it sooner. Rachel's voice softened. Lena, this isn't about revenge. It's about peace. You can't rebuild your life if you keep looking backward. For a moment, Lena looked like she might cry again. Then her face hardened. Enjoy your rebound, she hissed. Both of you. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel stood there, arms crossed, exhaling slowly. Think she'll try again, she asked. Probably, I said, but it won't matter. Why not? I pulled her close and smiled. Because I finally know the difference between being needed and being wanted. That night, I sat awake for a while thinking about how something so simple could take 12 years to learn. Being needed had felt powerful once, until I realized it was just another form of control. Being wanted was different. It meant being chosen, not used. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that Lena had moved back in with her parents. The house was gone foreclosed. The roommate arrangement hadn't worked out. She was back at square one, angry at the world, but still refusing to see her part in it. I didn't feel vindicated, just sad, because I knew how much easier her life could have been if she'd just learned to stand on her own. But that wasn't my lesson to teach anymore. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is stop rescuing them. Let them face the consequences they keep running from. That's what real friendship looks like, caring without enabling, supporting without surrendering, even if that friend used to be your wife. 6 months later, the dust had finally settled. No more unexpected calls, no more late-night emergencies, no more emotional blackmail disguised as friendship. I'd moved on fully this time. Rachel and I had built a quiet, balanced life together. She worked from home designing marketing materials for small businesses, and I'd switched to remote consulting after years of office burnout. Our days had rhythm again, coffee in the morning, walks at sunset, real laughter, the kind that doesn't need to be earned or apologized for. Sometimes, though, the quiet made me think about how much noise I used to live with. Lena's voice, always a mix of need and accusation, had once filled every corner of our house. Silence used to feel uncomfortable. Now it felt sacred. One evening, as we were cooking dinner, Rachel said something that made me stop mid-chop. Do you ever wonder if she's okay? It wasn't an accusation, just a question. I thought about it before answering. Yeah, I said. Sometimes. Rachel nodded. You don't hate her, do you? No, I said quietly. I don't think I ever did. I just finally stopped trying to save her. She smiled softly, stirring the sauce. That's the healthiest sentence I've ever heard you say. We both laughed, but there was a kind of melancholy truth behind it. Later that week, I ran into Lena's cousin at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, then relieved. "Marcus, hey, it's been forever." We exchanged polite small talk before she sighed and said, "You've probably heard about Lena." I hadn't. What happened? "She's been back with her parents for a while," her cousin said, lowering her voice. "The house got foreclosed. She lost her car. She's been struggling." I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry to hear that." "She doesn't blame you anymore," the cousin added. "At least not out loud." I smiled faintly. "That's progress." "She said you taught her something, though," the cousin continued. "She told my Aunt Marcus was the first person who didn't fix things for me. Maybe that's why I hated him." For a second, I couldn't speak. There it was, the sentence I'd hoped for, the one I never thought I'd hear. Not forgiveness, not apology, just understanding. "Thanks for telling me," I said finally, really. That night, I sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the trees, a quiet breeze moving through the yard. Rachel joined me, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "just thinking about her." About everything I said. About how you can spend years carrying someone through life, and the real act of love is finally letting them walk alone. Rachel leaned against my shoulder. "You did your part. The rest was hers." I nodded. She was right. We sipped our tea in silence. The world felt still, and for once I didn't feel the need to fill it with words. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note, the familiar cursive unmistakable. "Marcus, I wanted to say thank you. You were right about everything, about responsibility, about boundaries, about friendship. I wasn't ready to hear it before, but I get it now. I thought independence meant never needing anyone. Turns out it means learning when to take care of yourself. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be L." I read it twice. No anger, no manipulation, just closure. When Rachel came home that evening, I handed her the letter. She read it quietly and smiled. "Looks like she finally grew up," maybe I said. "Took her a while." Rachel folded the note and handed it back. "You're keeping it?" "Yeah," I said, not as a memory of her, as a reminder that people can change if they want to. Months passed and life kept moving. Rachel's freelance business took off. I found myself smiling more, sleeping better, feeling younger than I had in years. Sometimes I'd drive by the old neighborhood. The house Lena once fought to keep had a new family living in it. Kids' bikes on the lawn, curtains drawn, lights warm in the windows. It didn't sting. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like proof that time repairs what pride destroys. I rolled down the window and whispered to myself, "Good for them." On our anniversary, our first real anniversary, Rachel and I sat by the fire pit roasting marshmallows and laughing about how far we'd both come. She asked, "Do you ever think about the version of yourself that would have said yes to every one of her requests?" I smiled. "That guy doesn't exist anymore." "And the version of you now," she teased. I looked at her, the calm, grounded woman who'd walked into my life without asking me to save her. This version learned that peace isn't found in fixing people, I said. It's found in choosing someone who doesn't need fixing. She smiled and kissed me. Later that night, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, the final traces of a life that no longer fit. A picture of the old house, one of Lena smiling at a birthday dinner years ago, another of the 2 of us holding hands before everything fractured. I deleted them one by one, not out of anger, but gratitude. Because every mistake, every argument, every manipulation had led me here, to peace, to balance, to someone who understood what partnership truly meant. I put the phone down, looked at Rachel beside me and said, "You know what's funny? I used to think endings were the worst thing that could happen." And now she asked, "Now I think they're the only way new stories begin." That night, as the fire burned low and the world outside fell quiet, I realized something simple but profound. Letting go isn't losing. It's finally choosing yourself. And sometimes the person you save in the end, the one who really needed rescuing, was never your ex. It was you. A full year passed after the divorce. No more phone calls, no more urgent favors, no emotional chaos, just peace. Rachel and I had built something steady, quiet mornings with coffee, soft laughter over dinner, no tension hanging between words. It felt simple, and simplicity was new to me. One morning, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Lena." Don't worry, no emergencies. I just wanted you to know I'm okay. I'm renting a small apartment now, taking a finance class and paying off debt. I don't expect a reply. Just wanted to say thank you. I stared at the message for a while before replying. I'm glad you're doing well. That was it. No bitterness, no old ache, just quiet closure. Later that week, Rachel found me standing on the balcony, phone still in hand. She reached out, she asked. Yeah, I said, she's learning. Rachel smiled. Then you did something right. Maybe I said. Or maybe she finally started doing it for herself. Months later, a mutual friend told me Lena had found steady work and a new routine. She wasn't perfect, but she was stable. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for her outcome. That night, sitting by the fire pit, Rachel asked, Do you ever miss her? I thought about it. No, I said, but I'm grateful for what I learned from her. Which is, that peace isn't about fixing someone else. It's about not letting them break you while you try. She smiled. That sounds like a lesson worth keeping. One afternoon, while cleaning my desk, I found an old photo of Lena and me taken years ago before things went wrong. I looked at it for a long moment, then put it away in a drawer instead of the trash. Some memories don't need erasing. They just need perspective. Because I realized then letting go isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering differently. On our first anniversary, Rachel and I took a walk along the river. She slipped her hand into mine and said, You seem lighter lately. I am, I said. For the first time, I don't feel like I owe anyone a rescue. She laughed softly. And for the record, you don't owe me one either. I know, I said, smiling. That's why it works. That evening, as the sun sank behind the water, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Stillness, the kind that comes when every battle is finally over. No more proving, no more fixing, no more guilt. Just life, simple, steady, free. Because in the end, the greatest revenge wasn't anger or distance, it was happiness. The kind built on boundaries, self-respect, and love that didn't demand repair. And sometimes the person you end up saving is yourself. Here's the next story. I always believed Adrian and I were one of those rare couples everyone envied. I was 17 when we met. He was 18, tall, driven, the kind of young man who already carried himself like he'd figured out his future. The first time he smiled at me across that crowded party, I thought, this is it. Within months, we were inseparable. I moved into his apartment before graduation, convinced that love didn't need trial periods. He proposed at 21. I said yes before he even finished asking. But we waited until 26 to marry, because Adrian wanted stability first. He was practical like that, everything planned, everything earned. I admired that about him. It made me feel safe, like my life had been handed to someone competent. After the wedding, he made good on every promise. Promotions came, one after another. We spent nearly 3 years living abroad, Australia, New Zealand, traveling, eating out, watching sunsets on beaches that felt stolen from postcards. He made enough that I never had to worry about money or work. I told my friends I'd hit the jackpot, a husband who adored me, a life full of ease and adventure. When we came home, I got pregnant. Adrian was overjoyed. He read parenting books, built the crib, repainted the nursery 3 times because I couldn't decide on the shade of yellow. He wanted everything perfect. And for a while it was. When our son Noah arrived, Adrian was the kind of father every woman dreams of, patient, involved, gentle. But somewhere between diaper changes and late-night feedings, something shifted. Every evening after work, without fail, Adrian would slip out onto the balcony with a cigarette. He'd been smoking for years, but I'd never paid much attention before. Lately, though, it bothered me not because of the smell, but because of what it meant. An hour on that balcony every night, sometimes longer. I'd be inside wrangling a toddler, exhausted, desperate for adult conversation, and he'd be outside backlit by the glow of his phone and the ember of his cigarette. His silence began to feel like distance. When I tried to talk about it, he smiled and said, It's just how I unwind Lena, you know that. And I did. But still, it hurt. Then came the lockdown. The walls closed in. I'd been a stay-at-home mom for over 2 years. I loved Noah, but I missed myself. Missed using my brain for something beyond nap schedules and grocery lists. So when Parker, a marketing director I'd once met through a friend, messaged me about an assistant opening at his firm, it felt like fate. The office was all men. He mentioned that casually. But the idea of working again, dressing up again, being seen as something other than a mom lit a spark I hadn't felt in years. Adrian didn't hesitate when I told him. "If it makes you happy, do it," he said. Simple, supportive. I smiled, but deep down I wanted a different reaction. Something like, "Are you sure? What about the hours? Will it be too much?" I wanted him to care enough to question me, but instead he handed me full permission without thought. The first day at the new job felt like stepping into another world. Everyone was polite, funny, full of energy. Parker introduced me around, praising my resume like I was a star hire. The men noticed me, my clothes, my ideas, the way I handled tasks. It wasn't sleazy, it was attention, real living attention. At home, my world had shrunk to a handful of rooms and predictable routines. At work, it expanded again. By the end of week 1, I caught myself looking forward to Monday. Parker would ask my opinion on presentations. Evan from accounting started bringing me coffee every morning. Miles from design always found an excuse to linger at my desk. For the first time in a long while, I felt admired not for what I did, but for who I was. At home, it was different. I'd come back brimming with stories eager to share. Adrian would listen while feeding Noah, nodding in all the right places. Then as soon as our son was asleep, he'd mumble something about getting some air and step onto the balcony again. The glass door would slide shut, and I'd stare at his silhouette, my husband separated by a pane of glass and an hour of smoke. One night after another long day, I walked in to find Noah cranky and the apartment a mess. Adrian was, of course, outside. I handled dinner, bath time, bedtime alone. When he finally came in, I was on the couch, scrolling through work emails, still in my blazer. He sat down quietly beside me and took my hands. "Lena," he said, "what's going on? You're different lately." I frowned. "Different how?" "I don't know," he said. "You just feel far away. Like you're here, but you're not with us." Something inside me snapped. "Maybe I feel far away because I am far away," I said. "I'm out there trying to find a piece of myself again, and every night you disappear for hours like you're the one who needs a break." His jaw tightened. "I work 10-hour days to keep this family afloat, Lena. Those 20 minutes outside." 20 minutes, I cut in, laughing bitterly. "You're gone for over an hour every night, Adrian. One whole hour where I'm alone, cleaning up, exhausted, wishing we could just talk." We stared at each other, both shocked at how angry we sounded. 11 years together, and it was our first real fight. "I do everything for you and Noah," he said finally. "I thought you understood that." "I do," I whispered. "But I need more than your paycheck. I need you." He looked lost, like he'd stepped into a conversation he didn't know the script for. "I'll try," he said. "I'll come inside sooner. I'll be better." I nodded, but deep down something cold had already taken root. I wasn't sure he could fix what I no longer knew how to explain. That night I lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the city outside our window. I thought about the woman at work who smiled when Parker complimented her presentation about how alive the office felt compared to our apartment. And for the first time since I'd met Adrian, I wondered what if the fairy tale wasn't ending because of what we'd lost, but because I'd started craving something more than being adored. That question's simple poisonous was the beginning of everything that came next. The office had a new kind of energy, or maybe it was just me. Parker praised my organization. Evan dropped a coffee on my desk with a grin, and Miles leaned on my cubicle wall to ask for help on a project. I didn't even realize how much I'd missed being noticed. At home, the pattern stayed the same. I'd tell Adrian about my day clients' deadlines, the thrill of being useful again, and he'd nod while rinsing dishes. Then, like clockwork, the balcony door would slide open, the lighter would click, and the glass would separate our worlds again. I started counting how long he stayed out there. 20 minutes, 40, sometimes more. I could see his reflection in the window head-bent phone glowing in his hand. He wasn't doing anything wrong. But he wasn't with us either. At work, Parker invited me to Friday drinks. Team bonding, he said. It sounded harmless, professional even, but I hesitated. When I told Adrian, he said, "Go have fun," without a trace of jealousy. I smiled, but it stung. I didn't want permission. I wanted interest. That Friday, the bar lights were soft and warm, the kind that make everyone look a little more confident. People laughed, told stories, and clinked glasses. Parker kept the conversation flowing, always drawing me in. For the first time in years, I felt like I mattered in a room. When I got home, Adrian was sitting on the couch, a blanket folded neatly beside him. "Did you have a good time?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "It was nice." I'm glad he replied simply. No questions, no emotion, just calm acceptance. Somehow that calm hurt more than anger would have. Over the next weeks, work filled the silence I used to fill with daydreams. Parker gave me more responsibility. Miles started sending me drafts at night asking for feedback, and my inbox became a space where people waited for my opinion. I felt alive again. At home, Adrian tried to close the gap, less time smoking, more time with Noah. But even his efforts felt rehearsed. We were polite strangers sharing a routine. Then one Sunday at the park, I noticed my wedding ring was still sitting on the bathroom counter where I'd left it. I almost turned back for it, but didn't. The sun was bright, Noah was laughing, and for a moment I just wanted to feel light. When we stopped for lunch, Adrian noticed my hand. His smile faded. "Where's your ring?" he asked quietly. "I forgot it," I said. "Lena," he said after a long silence. "What's really happening?" The question cracked something open. I stared at the ground, then at him, the man who'd once been my whole world, now looking at me like a stranger he was trying to read. "I'm not sure I love you the same way anymore," I said. My voice didn't even shake. He blinked. "You're tired. We can fix this. Therapy time away, whatever you need." "It's not something you can fix," I whispered. "It's something that changed." He exhaled like the air had been punched out of him. I thought we were solid. So did I. That night, the house was unbearably quiet. After Noah went to sleep, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. No shouting, no blame, just logistics. How to split the car who'd keep the apartment, how to make the transition easiest for our son. Adrian's voice was steady, almost too calm. "I'll take care of rent until you're settled," he said, "and we'll split everything else evenly." I wanted him to fight for me. Instead, he respected my decision. When I packed my things, he helped carry boxes to the door. No dramatic goodbye, just a quiet understanding that the chapter had ended. The first night in my new apartment, the air felt too wide. No balcony, no lighter clicks, just the faint hum of the city. I should have felt free, but I didn't. I sat by the window and tried to breathe, telling myself this was what independence felt like. But beneath the calm was an ache I couldn't name, like I'd stepped out of one cage and into another, built entirely by my own choices. I told myself it was worth it, that I was finding myself again, that someday this emptiness would make sense. I didn't know it then, but what I was calling freedom was only the first taste of loneliness, the kind that doesn't come from being alone, but from walking away from someone who would have done anything to keep you. The first morning in my new apartment felt strange. Sunlight came through thin curtains I hadn't bothered to replace yet, and for the first time in years, there was silence. No cartoons from the living room, no Adrian's alarm, no scent of his coffee, just me and the hum of a refrigerator that seemed too loud for a place this small. At first, I told myself it was peace, freedom, the thing I'd been craving when I said I needed space. I walked barefoot on the cold tiles, opened windows just because I could, and let the air sting my face. I even made breakfast at noon because there was no one to wake, no one to serve. But freedom, I quickly realized, comes with paperwork, custody schedules, rent transfers, text messages that start with, "Hey," about Noah's, and end with, "I'll pick him up Sunday." Adrian and I spoke more as co-parents than as people who'd shared a decade together. His texts were polite, concise, sometimes too kind. That kindness unsettled me more than anger would have. The first Friday alone, Parker invited me to a client dinner. "You've earned it," he said. "We're celebrating the campaign." I hesitated. "It's kind of short notice." He smiled. "Come anyway. You'll like the place." That night, I sat across from him in a restaurant glowing with warm lights and laughter. The conversation flowed easily, nothing inappropriate, just that low hum of attention that makes you feel visible again. For months, I'd felt invisible at home. Now every word I spoke seemed to matter. When I returned to my apartment, I couldn't sleep. My mind spun with a mix of excitement and guilt. Adrian's voice echoed somewhere in me. I just want you to be happy. I told myself that's exactly what I was doing. Weeks passed, and I started saying yes to things I used to decline. After-work drinks, weekend brunches, a hiking trip with colleagues. Every outing felt like proof I'd done the right thing, proof that leaving had meaning. And yet, every Sunday night when Noah went back to Adrian's, the silence returned heavier than before. Parker started complimenting me more. "You're the reason this place runs," he said once after a presentation. I laughed it off, but inside it hit deeper than it should have. It wasn't about attraction, it was validation. A reminder that I was still someone worth noticing. Then there were others. Evan with his gentle humor, Miles with his steady confidence. Each new interaction chipped away at the dull ache of loneliness. They made me feel alive, interesting, wanted. I told myself I wasn't replacing Adrian. I was rediscovering myself. When I finally re-downloaded a dating app, it felt almost symbolic. Starting fresh, I wrote in my bio. The messages came fast, compliments, questions, flirtations. For every word of praise, I felt a jolt of affirmation. I wasn't just a mother or a wife who'd stopped being in love. I was Lena again. I was enough. The first man I met through the app, Ethan, was spontaneous and charming. He texted good mornings, sent pictures of his dog, and asked about my day in ways Adrian never did anymore. Our dates were light and fun, no heavy conversations, no responsibilities, just wine, laughter, and easy chemistry. Then came Daniel, smart, introspective, curious about everything. We spent hours talking about books, movies, and how people change. He said I had the kind of mind that sees through walls. I didn't correct him. I wanted to believe it was true. By the end of the second month, I'd gone out with both of them. Nothing serious, I told myself. Just living. Just learning who I was outside of the life I'd built too young. And yet when I looked in the mirror, I couldn't quite tell if I was becoming more myself or just running from the reflection of who I used to be. One evening, as I was folding laundry, my phone rang. Adrian. "Hey," he said, voice steady but quieter than usual. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Sure," I said, bracing. "Are you seeing anyone?" I hesitated. "I've been on some dates." "How many?" he asked. His tone wasn't jealous, it was clinical, as if taking inventory. "Does it matter?" I replied. "It matters to me." I swallowed. 5. The silence that followed stretched longer than any argument we'd ever had. "And, have you been close with any of them?" he asked finally. "Adrian, just answer me, please." I hesitated, then said softly, "Yes." 2. He exhaled long and slow. "Okay," he said, voice suddenly distant. "That's what I needed to know." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means I'm moving on too," he said quietly. "You're free to live your life." So am I. When the call ended, I sat there, phone still in hand, heart pounding. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. He was supposed to need time to wait, to maybe miss me enough to want me back someday. The idea that he might actually move on, that he might find someone else first, unsettled me in ways I didn't expect. That night, I lay awake replaying his voice, his composure, the way he didn't sound angry or broken. Just done, like a man who had finally stopped reaching for something already gone. The next morning, I opened social media and scrolled mindlessly until I landed on his new profile picture. Adrian standing by a lake, Noah on his shoulders, sunlight catching his hair. He looked happy, peaceful, whole. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe I'd left to find freedom, but all I could think was that he'd found it too, and maybe his version didn't include me at all. For the first time since I'd walked out, I felt something I hadn't expected, not regret, not guilt, but the faint, piercing fear that I had taught him how to live without me. When Adrian said he was moving on, I didn't believe him. Not really. He wasn't the kind of man who jumped from one thing to another. He was stable, loyal, deliberate. I told myself he was just hurt, trying to sound strong, that he needed time. But weeks turned into months, and the evidence began to pile up. At first it was small things. New photos of him and Noah at the zoo, at the park, at a diner I didn't even know he liked. He looked lighter, different. His eyes, once tired from work and family life, had that same quiet confidence I'd fallen for when we were teenagers. Then mutual friends started dropping hints. I ran into Adrian last week. He looks good. Did you know he's been working out? Someone said he brought a date to the company barbecue. Each comment hit like a dull thud in my chest. Meanwhile, my own life felt stuck. On the surface, things were fine. I still had my job. I still went out with friends. Parker kept me busy with new clients. But the rush of attention that once thrilled me now felt shallow, temporary. Every conversation at work started to sound the same. Every date, no matter how charming, ended with the same emptiness. Daniel, the intellectual one, had faded after a few weeks. Ethan, spontaneous and fun, started feeling unpredictable and immature. They liked me, sure, but they didn't see me. Not the way Adrian once had. The more I compared, the clearer it became. Every man I met was measured against a ghost of the man I'd left behind. Financially, reality was catching up too. Rent, utilities, car payments, they added up quickly. Adrian had been generous with support, but it wasn't the same. I missed the quiet security of knowing everything was handled. The peace of not having to check my bank balance before grocery runs. But what I missed most was Noah. Our custody arrangement was fair weekdays with me, weekends with Adrian, but fair doesn't mean easy. When Noah came home after a weekend with his dad, he was full of stories. Daddy took me to see airplanes. Daddy's friend made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Daddy says we might go camping. I smiled, nodded, praised his adventures, and then locked myself in the bathroom to cry quietly where he couldn't hear. Because for the first time I realized Adrian wasn't just a good father. He was a better one without me. 8 months after I left, I decided to reach out. Not about money or Noah, about us. Hey, I texted. Could we grab coffee sometime just to talk? He agreed. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our apartments. He arrived early, of course. Still the same punctual calm put together. But there was something new about him, too. A confidence that wasn't about control, but peace. How have you been? I asked, trying to sound casual. Good, he said simply. Work steady. Noah's thriving. You? Busy, I replied. But it's been lonely, if I'm honest. He nodded, polite but distant. After a few minutes of small talk, I finally said what I'd come for. I've been thinking, maybe we could try again. Counseling, maybe. We were good once. Maybe we could be again. Adrian looked down at his coffee for a long time before answering. When he did, his tone was gentle but final. Lena, I offered counseling when you told me you wanted to leave. You said it was too late. I know, I said quickly. I was wrong. People make mistakes. I didn't realize what I had. He sighed. You're right, people change their minds. But some choices change everything. Tears stung my eyes. So that's it? 12 years and you're just done. You were done 8 months ago, he said quietly. When you took off your ring. When you told me you didn't love me. I'm just catching up. I stared at him, searching for some trace of the old Adrian, the one who'd move mountains to keep me. But he wasn't that man anymore. He didn't look angry or bitter. He just looked free. But we have a family, I whispered. He shook his head. We have a son. And we'll always have that. But the family you're talking about ended the day you chose yourself over both of us. The words landed like a slow, sharp ache, because deep down I knew he was right. Still, I couldn't accept it. I miss you, I said. He gave a small, sad smile. I know you do. But missing someone isn't the same as loving them. And it's definitely not the same as being in love. You taught me that. I wanted to argue to remind him of the years we'd built, the sacrifices we'd made. But something in his voice told me it wouldn't matter. He had already let go. That night I walked home in the cold, holding back tears. My apartment felt emptier than ever. I stared at the wall where I'd hung photos of my new life, smiling faces from work dinners, filtered snapshots from nights out. They looked artificial now, like a story I'd told myself to stay brave. The truth was I wasn't brave, I was lost. Adrian had moved on not out of spite, but out of survival. And I couldn't blame him. For years he'd carried the weight of us while I chased the feeling of being seen. And when I finally found that attention, I mistook it for love. Now I was learning the difference the hard way. Freedom had come at a cost. I hadn't calculated the loss of a man who would have forgiven anything except the moment I decided he wasn't enough. And as I lay awake that night, the city quiet outside my window, one thought kept echoing in my mind, not as regret but as truth. He didn't stop loving me, he just stopped waiting. I used to believe that love, real love, always left a door open. That no matter what happened, if you were brave enough to say I'm sorry, the universe would somehow bend things back into place. I held on to that belief long after I should have known better. After our coffee, Adrian didn't call. He didn't text. Our communication was limited to short factual messages about Noah pickup times, school events, doctor appointments. He was always polite, always calm, but there was no warmth left between the lines. Meanwhile, I tried to move forward. I told myself I could rebuild. I doubled down on work, volunteered for every project, said yes to every new client. Parker praised my dedication. Miles joked that I was becoming the glue that holds the office together. Outwardly, I smiled. Inwardly, I felt hollow, because none of it filled the space where my marriage used to live. Dustin came next, a man I met through friends. Charming, confident, good at saying the right things. He liked that I was independent, that I had my own career. At first, it was exactly what I thought I wanted. Dinners turned into weekends. Weekends turned into shared routines. But it wasn't the same. There was no steady calm beneath the surface, no quiet reassurance that I was safe. He didn't love me, not really. He liked the idea of me just like I had once liked the idea of freedom. Money was tighter now. My salary was decent, but rent and daycare drained it quickly. Some nights I'd open my banking app and stare at the numbers, remembering the ease of our old life. Back then, bills just disappeared. Groceries stocked themselves. Vacations were planned with one conversation, not 3 months of saving. It's embarrassing to admit how much I'd taken all that for granted. Noah was my one constant joy, but even that came with quiet heartbreak. He was thriving. Every time I picked him up, he had new stories. Daddy's girlfriend taught me to make pancakes. Daddy's new house has a tree with a swing. Daddy says we're going camping next month. I always smiled. I told him how proud I was, but inside I was shrinking. The picture he was painting Adrian's new life was everything I had once wanted: stability, laughter, purpose. Only now I wasn't part of it. When mutual friends mentioned Adrian's girlfriend, I told myself it didn't bother me. But it did. A lot. I started checking his social media again, something I'd promised myself I wouldn't do. The photos hurt the most, not because they showed him happy, but because he looked peaceful. It was the peace he'd always wanted with me, and now he'd found it somewhere else. One night after Noah fell asleep, I wrote Adrian an email. It wasn't planned, it just spilled out. I know I hurt you. I know I left you with questions you'll never get answered properly. But I want you to know I see it now, the things you did, the quiet ways you loved me. You made our life look easy because you carried the heavy parts alone. I'm sorry for not seeing that before. If there's ever a chance to start again, even as friends, I'd like that. I stared at the screen for nearly half an hour before hitting send. He replied the next morning. Lena, I appreciate the message. I truly do. But I've moved on. I'm with someone who wants the same things I do. Someone who stays when things get difficult. I'll always respect you as Noah's mother, but I can't go backward. I hope you understand. I read it over and over until the words blurred. It wasn't cruel. It was final. That day I sat at my desk staring at the wall, realizing I'd built my own prison. I'd wanted adventure, attention, validation, and in chasing them, I'd dismantled the only real home I ever had. For months afterward, I kept trying to convince myself I'd learned something valuable, that the pain meant growth. But late at night, when the apartment was still, all I could think was how easily I'd mistaken being seen for being understood. Adrian used to understand me even in silence. These new men, They saw the version of me I performed for them, confident, lively, independent. But they didn't know the quiet parts. The parts that still woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Dustin eventually ended things. "You're still somewhere else," he said gently, "and I don't think it's a place I can follow." He was right. My heart was stuck in a loop, one I'd written myself into. By the time the first anniversary of our separation arrived, Adrian and his girlfriend were living together. Noah adored her, and for the first time I didn't feel angry about it. I just felt small, like I'd stepped out of a story that kept going without me. I still remember standing by my window that night, city lights flickering below, realizing something that took me a full year to understand. Freedom means nothing if you don't know what to do with it. I thought I wanted space to find myself, but all I found was distance. Between who I was and who I'd become. Between the woman who wanted to be adored and the one who learned too late that adoration and love are not the same thing. Adrian didn't punish me. Life did quietly, patiently, in the way it often does when lessons come too late. He gave me what I asked for: freedom. And I discovered that freedom without love is just another form of loneliness. Sometimes I still dream of that first night in our old apartment, the one filled with boxes and laughter, when he said, "We'll build something amazing here." I believed him. We did. And I was the one who walked away from it. Now, when Noah runs into his father's arms at drop-off, I remind myself this is what peace looks like. Not mine, but his. And maybe that's the truest form of love left between us, wanting him to keep it, even if it means I never get it back. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.